seen the Temperley show, and it's something I always look forward to every season actually. Not just because Alice is a friend and a gorgeous girl, but I've worn Temperley for a long time.
Picture this, it's the 1980s, the golden age of supermodels. The era when names like Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, and Linda Evangelista didn't just belong to fashion, they were fashion. Imagine walking down a runway and the cameras don't just flash, they explode like fireworks. Versace, Chanel, Dior. Your face is everywhere. Glossy covers, billboards, TV ads. You're not just modeling clothes, you're setting trends, shaping beauty standards, and living a life that looks like a fairy tale from the outside. Now add this twist. You're married to one of the biggest rock stars on the planet, Yasmin Le Bon, the voice of Duran, the band that defined an era, filled stadiums, and had fans fainting in the front row. Together, you're not just a couple, you're the couple. Glamorous, untouchable. The kind of pairing magazines drooled over and tabloids couldn't get enough of. Yasmin and Yasmin Le Bon. Fashion royalty meets rock royalty. Sounds like a dream life, right? The money, the fame, the endless parties in Paris, Milan, New York, front row seats, the yachts, private jets. Everyone wanted to be you, or at least be in your orbit. But here's the thing, what if behind the dazzling lights and flawless photo shoots, the story wasn't so perfect? What if behind the Vogue covers and the screaming fans, there were cracks, deep ones, that the world never really saw? Because let's be honest, when we look at supermodels on a glossy magazine cover, we never think about heartbreak, loss, or the pressure of being perfect 24/7. We just see the glamour. But Yasmin's story, it's not just about walking the runway or smiling for cameras. It's about survival, about keeping it together when life threw punches that no amount of beauty or fame could shield her from. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story about fashion and fame. It's about a woman who lived through the extremes of both, the dizzying highs and the devastating lows. Yasmin Le Bon, supermodel, wife, mother, survivor, a woman who looked like she had it all, but behind the curtains, faced battles that could have broken anyone else. And trust me, you've never heard her story told like this. Here's the truth about stories like Yasmin's. The public always gets the highlight reel, never the blooper reel. You see the magazine covers, the runway struts, the high-profile marriage mark, and you think, wow, she's living the dream. The reality? It was a dream stitched together with both silk and razor wire. Behind the catwalks and champagne toasts, Yasmin was battling moments that could bring anyone to their knees. Miscarriages that shattered her heart, rumors that threatened her marriage, breakdowns she had to keep hidden because, well, supermodels aren't supposed to cry, right? Let's pause for a second. Think about the pressure here. You're not just walking a runway, you're walking under the weight of an entire industry's expectations. One wrong move, one off day, one unflattering photo, and it's splashed across tabloids, dissected like it's breaking news. And if that wasn't enough, you're also the wife of a global rock icon, which means every glance, every rumor, every whispered, "Did you hear?" gets magnified 1,000 times. It makes you wonder, how do you keep it together when the world is watching your every move? How do you smile for the cameras when you just lost something so personal, so devastating, that the last thing you want to do is face a crowd? See, Yasmin's story isn't just glitz and glamour. It's raw, it's messy, it's deeply human, and maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. Because while everyone else was busy idolizing her life, she was just trying to survive it. And let's be real here, isn't that always the case? We look at celebrities and think their lives are flawless. Perfect bodies, perfect careers, perfect relationships. But behind closed doors, it's often chaos. Yasmin just had the cameras flashing while it all unfolded. So before we dive into the photo shoots and the Vogue covers, the love story with Yasmin Le Bon, and the legendary runway moments, we need to rewind. Because no one just wakes up one morning as an international supermodel. There's always a beginning, and Yasmin's beginning, it's not what you'd expect. Oxford, England, 1964. A little girl born to an Iranian father and an English mother. a girl who had no idea that one day she'd redefine beauty standards on runways around the world. But before the fame, she was just Yasmin, a kid who spent her Saturdays flipping through Vogue like it was scripture, a kid who didn't know where life was headed, but had a hunger for something bigger. And that hunger, it was about to change everything. All right, let's rewind. Oxford, England. 1964, Yasmin Parvene, later known as Yasmin Le Bon, is born. Her dad, an Iranian immigrant, worked as a photography lecturer. Her mom, English, had a job as a window dresser. In other words, this wasn't a family dripping in wealth or connections. It was normal, ordinary, the kind of background you wouldn't expect to launch a global fashion phenomenon. But here's where it gets interesting. Yasmin wasn't just another kid who liked playing dress up. From a ridiculously young age, she was obsessed with aesthetics. Her dad's passion for photography rubbed off on her, and it planted the seed, a love for images, for beauty, for the way light could transform a face. At 13, while most kids were spending their pocket money on candy, band posters, or movie tickets, Yasmin was doing something else entirely. She was blowing her Saturday job wages on Vogue every single month. Imagine that. A teenager who didn't just flip through the glossy pages for fun. She studied them. The lighting, the styling, the makeup, the poses. She wasn't daydreaming. She was training. Quietly preparing for a world she hadn't even stepped into yet. And yet, despite this obsession, Yasmin wasn't the type of kid who strutted around declaring, "I'm going to be a model." Nope, she was just floating. She didn't have a clear plan after school. While her friends were mapping out their futures, college, jobs, careers, Yasmin was undecided, lost in a sea of possibilities. But here's the thing about destiny. Sometimes it needs a push. And in Yasmin's case, that push came from her friends. They wouldn't stop saying it. "You should be a model. Seriously, you've got the look." At first, she brushed it off, but when the pressure kept building, it got under her skin. And finally, Yasmin snapped and thought, "Fine, let's try this modeling thing. What's the worst that could happen?" So in 1983, drenched from the rain, wearing clothes that screamed tomboy rather than supermodel, she hopped on a train to London. No contacts, no stylist, no glamorous portfolio, just her raw self and a nervous energy pushing her forward. And here's where it gets cinematic. She didn't knock on just any agency's door. She knocked on Models One, one of the biggest, most respected modeling agencies in London. Bold, right? And guess what? They signed her on the spot. Think about that. One minute she's a 17-year-old with no plan. The next, she's working gigs within a week. It was like a door to another universe had swung wide open. But let's not gloss over this. Yasmin wasn't the ideal model type for the early 80s. Back then, the fashion industry was dominated by blonde hair, blue eyes, and very specific beauty standards. Yasmin didn't fit that mold. Dark hair, dark eyes, ethnically ambiguous features. In her own words, she had a weird face for the industry at the time. And yet, that so-called weird face was exactly what made her stand out. She wasn't a copy and paste beauty, she was different. And in a sea of cookie-cutter models, different was exactly what the world needed. This was the spark, the beginning of a career that would redefine what beauty looked like on the global stage. So here's Yasmin, freshly signed to Models One. No portfolio stacked with high-end shoots, no insider pulling strings, just raw potential, and a face the industry couldn't ignore. And the wild part? Within a week of walking through that agency door, she was already working. That almost never happens. Usually models hustle for months, sometimes years, before their first real break. But Yasmin, she just landed. And when she landed, she didn't just blend into the background, she exploded. By the mid-80s, Yasmin was walking for the biggest fashion houses in the world. Versace, Chanel, Dior, Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, you name it, she did it. If there was a runway that mattered, Yasmin's heels had clicked across it, and she wasn't just one of many. she was front and center, a face the industry couldn't get enough of. Let's talk numbers for a second, because the numbers are jaw-dropping. Yasmin appeared on over 300 magazine covers worldwide. Think about that. That's not just a career highlight, that's a legacy. She wasn't a one-season wonder. She was everywhere. Italian Vogue, covered. Ella, both British and American first issues, covered. She wasn't just in fashion, she was fashion. Now, here's what made her so magnetic. She broke the mold. In an era where designers were still clinging to a very narrow definition of beauty, Yasmin was different. She wasn't blonde, she wasn't blue-eyed, she didn't fit the cookie-cutter standard. But instead of seeing that as a weakness, she turned it into her strength. Her weird face, as she put it, became her superpower. She was striking, unique, unforgettable. And fashion, at its core, craves the unforgettable. By the late 80s, Yasmin had become one of the highest-paid models in the world. Let that sink in. A girl who once didn't even know what she wanted to do with her life was now making more money strutting down a runway than most people could dream of in a lifetime. But it wasn't just about the money. Yasmin was shaping the culture of beauty itself. Designers adored her because she brought something fresh to the table. Photographers loved her because she understood images, the angles, the light, the art behind the lens, thanks to her father's influence. And the public? They were captivated. She wasn't just another pretty face, she was a face with depth, with a story behind the eyes. And if all of that wasn't enough, Yasmin became part of an unstoppable cultural force when her personal life crossed into her career. Enter Yasmin Le Bon. Yes, that's Yasmin Le Bon, lead singer of Duran, one of the biggest bands of the 80s. At the peak of her modeling career, Yasmin caught his eye. The result? The ultimate power couple of the decade. Fashion royalty meets rock royalty. Suddenly, Yasmin wasn't just on the covers of fashion magazines. She was splashed across tabloids, music mags, and celebrity spreads. The public couldn't get enough of them. But more on Yasmin in a moment. Let's stick with Yasmin's career highs for now. Because here's something you might not realize. Yasmin wasn't just working with the top designers. She was shaping their shows. Take Chanel, for instance. Yasmin became a familiar face in Karl Lagerfeld's world, walking alongside other legends like Cindy, Naomi, and Claudia. She wasn't just fitting into the supermodel lineup, she was holding her own among giants. And let's not forget that moment in 1991, a moment that blended Yasmin's personal and professional life into one unforgettable scene. At Chanel's fall-winter show, Yasmin walked the runway with her 20-month-old daughter Amber in her arms. Dressed in a custom baby onesie designed by Lagerfeld himself, it wasn't just adorable, it was historic. Vogue later crowned it one of the greatest mother-daughter runway moments of all time. Moments like these proved Yasmin wasn't just a model. She was an icon. Someone who brought personality, emotion, and a sense of realness to an industry often criticized for being shallow and unattainable. So let's recap. By the time Yasmin was in her 20s, she had walked for the biggest names in fashion, graced hundreds of magazine covers, redefined beauty standards with her unique look, become one of the highest-paid models of her generation, made history on the runway as both a supermodel and a mother. Not bad for a girl who once hopped on a train to London with zero plan and rain-soaked clothes, right? But here's the kicker. While her professional life was soaring higher than ever, her personal life was about to take center stage. And that's where things got even more dramatic. Because if you thought Yasmin's career had twists, wait until you hear about the romance, the heartbreak, and the headlines that came with being Mrs. Le Bon. All right, let's set the scene. It's 1984. Yasmin is at the height of her modeling rise, doing shoots with top photographers, strutting down runways, and making a name for herself as one of the most in-demand faces of the decade. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pop culture universe, Yasmin Le Bon is leading Duran to global domination. Hungry Like the Wolf, Rio, The Reflex, the kind of songs that don't just play on the radio, they own the airwaves. So how does the world's most in-demand model meet the lead singer of one of the biggest bands on earth? Through a photograph, literally. Here's how it went down. Simon was flipping through a photographer's portfolio one day when he saw Yasmin's picture. And just like that, bam. Love at first sight, at least for him. He pointed at the photo and basically said, I need to meet her. Rock star confidence, right? Now, let's be real here. Most of the time, when a rock star says he needs to meet a model, you roll your eyes. But Simon wasn't giving up. He pulled strings, asked around, even got other models involved to make the introduction. Eventually, Yasmin agreed to meet him, reluctantly, I might add. Their first official outing, the royal premiere of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yeah, no pressure, just a high-profile event with a paparazzi watching your every move. And here's the twist. Yasmin wasn't impressed at first. She thought the whole setup was weird. But Simon had something that set him apart from the stereotypical rock god persona. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't dripping in ego. He was funny, self-confident, and surprisingly down to earth. Against all odds, Yasmin found herself drawn to him. Fast forward, and by December 1985, barely a year after that fateful meeting, Yasmin and Simon were married. Now, if you're imagining some glamorous, star-studded wedding, dripping in designer gowns and champagne fountains, forget it. Their ceremony took place in Oxford at a register office just 2 days after Christmas. Simple, low-key. In fact, Yasmin didn't even have a proper wedding dress. The only thing open was a Benetton store, so she bought a beige, fluffy jumper dress and wore that down the aisle. Not exactly couture, but you know what? It worked. That's the thing about Yasmin and Simon. Sure, they were a power couple, but they weren't playing by the usual celebrity couple rules. They weren't trying to be perfect. They were real, messy, spontaneous, and, most importantly, in love. And it wasn't long before their relationship turned into something the media couldn't resist. Think about it. Yasmin, the supermodel, and Simon, the rock star. Together, they embodied the glam excess of the 80s. But behind the headlines, they were building something much more personal, a family. They went on to have 3 daughters, Amber, Saffron, and Tallulah. And here's what's wild. Yasmin didn't step away from modeling when she became a mother. She doubled down. Remember that Chanel Runway moment in 1991 when baby Amber joined her on stage in a custom Lagerfeld onesie? That wasn't just a fashion statement, it was Yasmin rewriting the rules. You could be a mother and a supermodel. You could be domestic and glamorous. But don't get it twisted. Being married to a rock star wasn't all roses and champagne. Simon's fame came with groupies, and Yasmin had to deal with women constantly throwing themselves at her husband. And how did she handle it? Let's just say she didn't exactly play coy. One of her legendary moves. If she saw someone getting a little too cozy with Simon backstage, she'd casually walk up, grab him by the, well, family jewels, and hold on. Message delivered. These are mine. Back off. Bold, yes. Effective, absolutely. Still, their marriage wasn't just tabloid fodder. It was a partnership. Yasmin supported Simon's music career, even appearing in Duran's 2011 video Girl Panic, alongside other supermodel legends. They weren't just a couple. They were a brand, proof that love, glamour, and staying power could coexist, even in an industry built on fleeting trends. So, on the outside, Yasmin and Simon were untouchable, the perfect power couple. But inside their private life, the cracks were starting to show: miscarriages, rumors of infidelity, the relentless pressure of fame, the kind of challenges that test not just a marriage, but a person's soul. And those dark moments, they were coming fast. Here's the part you don't see on glossy magazine covers, the moments no PR team wants to talk about. Because while Yasmin Le Bon looked like she had it all, the career, the husband, the money, the fame, she was also carrying scars the world never saw. Let's start with the most devastating: the miscarriages. After marrying Simon in December 1985, Yasmin was over the moon about starting a family. By August of the next year, she was 6 months pregnant. It should have been the happiest time of her life. But life, as it often does, had other plans. At that time, Simon was competing in the Whitbread Round the World yacht race, one of the most dangerous sailing events in the world. Yasmin, heavily pregnant, stayed home in London, glued to the TV watching updates. And then the unthinkable happened. Simon's yacht capsized in brutal weather. He and his crew were trapped below deck for hours. The entire world watched, wondering if they'd make it out alive. For Yasmin, it was too much. The stress, the fear, the emotional shock of nearly losing her husband while carrying their child, it was overwhelming. She fainted. And when she came to, doctors gave her the news no expectant mother ever wants to hear. She had lost the baby. Heartbreak. Pure, unimaginable heartbreak. But the pain didn't stop there. 2 years later, Yasmin became pregnant again. Hope returned. She was excited, preparing, buying clothes, reading books, ready to finally hold a child in her arms. But once again, tragedy struck. At 5 months, she miscarried. No clear medical reason, just loss. Another devastating blow that ripped away the dream of motherhood for a second time. These were private battles fought behind the public image of perfection. Yasmin still had to show up for shoots, strut down runways, smile for cameras, all while her heart was breaking inside. And let's be real, nobody puts that on a magazine cover. Now, while Yasmin and Simon eventually did have 3 beautiful daughters, Amber, Saffron, and Tallulah, those early years were haunted by grief. And grief doesn't just disappear, it lingers. It reshapes you. And just when Yasmin was trying to hold herself together, another storm hit. The tabloids. See, being married to a rock star comes with its own unique brand of hell. Groupies, rumors, headlines. Every time Simon was on tour or away recording, the press had a field day. Whispers of infidelity, scandalous photos, anonymous sources, claiming he wasn't faithful. You know the drill. Most of it was exaggerated. Some of it was flat-out lies. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. When your face is on the front page with words like cheating scandal stamped next to it, the damage is done. Yasmin once admitted how painful it was, not just for her, but for her family. You try not to let things affect you, she said, but it's hurtful. Imagine constantly having to defend your marriage, your trust, your husband, not just to strangers, but to the people you love. And then there's the pressure of simply being Yasmin Le Bon, the supermodel, the image of perfection. Think about it. When your job is literally to look flawless, how do you admit you're breaking inside? How do you say, I'm hurting, when the whole world expects you to smile, pose, and radiate confidence? Behind the flashbulbs and red carpets, Yasmin was human, exhausted, heartbroken, and struggling to balance it all. Her career demanded constant travel. Her marriage demanded resilience. Motherhood brought both joy and fear. And the public demanded she never crack under the pressure. And yet, despite the heartbreak, despite the rumors, despite the endless scrutiny, she kept going. She didn't retreat. She didn't disappear. She stayed in the game, stayed visible, stayed strong, even when strength was the hardest thing to find. That's the side of Yasmin Le Bon most people never knew. The woman who looked like she had everything. But behind the scenes, carried loss, pain, and the kind of challenges that could have destroyed her. But here's the twist. Yasmin didn't just endure these challenges. She came back stronger, reinvented, still modeling, still relevant, still standing tall long after many of her peers faded into obscurity. And that resilience? That's what makes her story unforgettable. Here's the thing about Yasmin Le Bon. She was never just another face in the crowd. Yes, she was beautiful. Yes, she was successful. But what made her truly unforgettable was her ability to last, to keep going, to reinvent herself in an industry that chews people up and spits them out after a few good seasons. Think about it. How many models from the 80s are still working today? Not many. Fashion is fickle. One year you're the it girl, the next you're forgotten. But Yasmin, she's still here, still modeling, still relevant. That takes grit, that takes resilience. After those devastating miscarriages, after the endless tabloid rumors, Yasmin could have easily stepped out of the spotlight. She had every reason to retreat into private life. But she didn't. She doubled down. She kept walking runways, kept shooting campaigns, kept showing the industry that she wasn't going anywhere. And here's the kicker. She didn't just survive, she thrived. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, Yasmin continued working with major brands and appearing in high-profile campaigns. She wasn't just clinging to relevance, she was evolving with the times. When the fashion industry shifted, she shifted with it. She proved that beauty didn't have an expiration date, and that models could have careers that lasted decades, not just a fleeting moment in the spotlight. And her comeback wasn't just about her career, it was about her personal strength too. Yasmin built a life that balanced family and fame. She raised 3 daughters while continuing to model at the highest level. She supported Simon through his music career, touring, recording, facing his own ups and downs, while maintaining her own identity as more than the rock star's wife. Even in the 2010s, Yasmin was still making waves. Remember Duran's Girl Panic video? Yasmin starred in it alongside other supermodel legends, Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Helena Christensen, and Eva Herzegovina. They weren't just playing roles, they were making a statement. We're still here, and we're still iconic. That's the power of Yasmin Le Bon. She never let the struggles define her. She never let the losses take her down. She showed the world that you could face tragedy, survive the headlines, and still walk back into the spotlight with your head held high. And maybe that's why her story hits so hard. Because it's not just about fashion, it's about resilience. About refusing to quit when life tries to break you. About proving that glamour and grit can live side by side. So when we talk about Yasmin's comeback, it's not just one big moment. It's a lifetime of choosing to stand back up again and again. That's not just resilience. That's legacy in the making. So here we are, we've walked the runways, we've lived the highs, and we've felt the heartbreaks right alongside Yasmin Le Bon. From Oxford to the catwalks of Paris, from Vogue covers to tabloid scandals, from miscarriages that could have broken her spirit to 40 years of marriage with one of the most famous rock stars of all time. And through it all, what stands out isn't just the beauty. It isn't even the fame. It's the resilience. Think about it. Yasmin stepped into the modeling world when the odds weren't in her favor. Dark hair, dark eyes, features that didn't fit the narrow beauty standards of the early 80s. And she turned that into her strength. She didn't just succeed. She redefined what beauty looked like. She survived the kind of personal losses that most people would struggle to recover from.